Welcome to the Manscape Podcast about being a man in today's ever-changing world. I'm Joseph Benish.
And I am Tim Cox. In this episode, we talk Star Wars, autism, and why we decided to start a podcast. Mm-hmm. But first, if you like what you're hearing, tell a friend, share this episode, leave us a kind review, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, at the Manscape Pod. If you feel like reaching out, we'd love to hear from you. Email us at themanscapepod@gmail.com. Joseph, let's talk the podcast first.
Yeah, I mean, this is the inaugural episode. And how often do you get to use the word inaugural? It's a good word. Yeah, so this podcast, yeah, right. Unfortunately. I have three thoughts for this. And I don't know if you're supposed to have intentions about podcasts, but I guess everybody does. First is I want it to be a place where people can have a conversation about things they may or may not agree on and learn how to have these conversations. And that's related to the second reason I wanted to do this, is because in our world, there is no right and wrong. There is no good and bad. There's only that big gray spectrum in the middle. And spectrum, kind of a almost a pun based on this, the other one of the topics for this podcast. And then third is because I wanted to balance it out with just learning about cool shit. We've all got, fun friends that know about food and fashion and alcohol and cigars and stuff. So let's take time to bring those people in to have a deep dive on cool shit in the world. So that way we get some deep conversation and just learn about some fun stuff along the way. What about you?
Nice. Well, I already was doing a podcast, but you had approached me about this podcast and asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. And I immediately said yes. Well, for the most part, because I just like to talk. So, I run my mouth quite a bit, but I think for the most part, what intrigued me most about your idea was that it was rational conversation. We have two, different political views. We look at the world in two different ways, but we've still been friends for over 20 years, and there's a lot of people talking and not a lot of people listening to each other. And listening to hear what each other has to say and their opinions, despite the fact that they agree or don't agree, they hear each other out and they respect what each other's opinions are and just shake hands and they're on their way. So that is essentially why I definitely wanted to do this, because I think we've had a lot of conversations in the past and it's despite the fact that I'm a little bit more on the conservative end of things, I seem to have wowed you with the way I feel about the world. And at the same time, I think we kind of see things very similar, but different,
Yeah. Like there's a lot of overlap. And I love what you said about the listening. Yeah. Humans, especially like in Western world, we're always waiting for our turn to talk. So like, how do we create a space where you're trying to listen first? It's really hard for us to do. We're all, individuals. We all have opinions. We all have assholes. So, but how do you practice that listening? Yeah. Yeah,
that's true. And, and I think in a lot of ways, people aren't really listening to the there's not just two sides of every story. There's multiple sides, and you have to hear
so many
everything to really form an opinion. But in this day and age, people are really fed their opinions and they just go along with things. And this is kind of where we are in the world. This is where we are politically, economically, and we believe what the little box is telling us, and
those algorithms that feed us the stuff, myself included, it's like technology. It was all really good ideas, really cool technology. So we can see what's going on in the world. We can see, things happening around the world instantly, but also now dividing us, because those algorithms that showed us like what t-shirt we want to wear was like, man, I really like a t-shirt or that pair of Converse, They're also feeding us our political views, more of the same. Like I've got 5 pairs of Converse, and I've got the same 5 sort of feeds coming into my devices. So these algorithms that were meant for good and making things easier on us are also like messing with our heads because they're narrowing our views of the world.
That's right. So then here we are, ready to talk about the things in the world, random topics, social topics, entertainment topics, all kinds of different things that we want to provide our perspective on, and kind of share the Manscape, so to speak. Yeah. Right.
Yes. The Manscape of what's out there. And I'm really excited when we get guests. I mean, an inaugural episode, this is just obviously going to be us riffing, but I'm excited for guests, for listener mail. If that happens, once we get up to our tens of listeners. Oh, do you want to talk about your other podcast? Because that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, so I know, and you've been a guest on our show, or a co-host actually. It's The Final Take, which is an entertainment TV podcast. No, just completely audio. We're on all the platforms at The Final Take Pod on all social channels, and thefinaltakepod.com is where you can hear us talk about myself and my partner in crime and brother-in-law, Nelson. We talk movies, TVs, all kinds of pop culture stuff, and what's streaming, what's coming up, and it's a really good time. It's a lot of shenanigans, so to speak. So.
It is. You should check it out. It's a great podcast. It's one of my guilty pleasures. It's one of my weekend podcasts, and that's probably a good segue. Are we going to talk about autism first or wars first?
You know what? I would say let's kind of one hand washes the other, but let's talk about autism first.
Yeah.
Autism wars. So we're talking Star Wars and autism at the same time. Mm-hmm. And you came up with this topic. Mm-hmm. Tell me why you came up with this topic.
Yeah, the autism for a couple of reasons. One, because, and you're pretty open about having a son with autism. And I have a couple family members have a different, disability of different kinds. Although a lot of people think that they have autism, and I've worked with kids with autism when I worked in group homes. So I've kind of been around that community a fair bit. Probably fair to say more than the average person. And I actually think that's one of the things that society is kind of waking up to. Using that word spectrum I did before very intentionally, is like this world is very, very broad, autism, Asperger's, and I think it's a great sort of keyhole to start, looking through and opening up, things we didn't know 20 years ago, certainly 60 years ago, about people, the way our brains work, that we're opening up to. And I know I wouldn't be the person I am if I didn't have, my hero, who's my brother, who grew up with a disability. He's, what people would call neuroatypical. And, he's my hero. He's my great teacher. So, so that was for me like a kind of a good, deep thing, but something I have a connection to, and hopefully stuff you're willing to share about that. But the world just continually learns, and that's a good thing. Like what's going on more and more about people with autism.
Yeah. Well, the Star Wars thing comes into play because as a new dad, my dance card was essentially, I want to coach Little League. I want to go to baseball games. I want to do this. I want to do that. And then when he was about 3 years old, or no, 4 years, I think he was 4 years old. We had him in speech and occupational therapy, for speech delays and cognitive delays. But once he got out of preschool going into kindergarten, they had given him a determination of autism through the public school system. And, and there was a lot of, it wasn't, an easy life, lots of appointments, going through the medical diagnosis process too. So a lot of those things that I had initially thought about when I was becoming a new dad was, just completely falling off the list, completely, nothing. Mm-hmm. And so Star Wars actually became one of the biggest connections that we've had. It was the first real one. He's, definitely, my son, he loves hugs. He's a sweet little kid. But when it comes to having that father-son connection with him, it was, just like I was his dad and he was my son. And that was really kind of it. I, met his needs and fed him and bathed them and all that other kind of stuff. But ultimately that, thing in common had yet to be established. And surprisingly enough, it was the Mandalorian that did it.
I don't think I knew that, because I knew you had mentioned Star Wars being a connector for you too, but I didn't know which. I assumed, of course, it was Episode 4, A New Hope, but that was apparently wrong.
Well, I tried to get him to watch this, different Star Wars things. He had watched like the Clone Wars and stuff like that, because mainly it was cartoons and stuff, and that was really it. Just colorful objects on the screen and stuff. But starting with the Mandalorian, we were able to go back and start watching the original Star Wars trilogy.
Oh,
not yet made it through the prequels. I think he may have watched some of the sequel trilogy, the most recent.
You didn't you didn't let him watch the prequels, did you? Because I'm going to call CPS right now if you let your son watch the prequel.
He only watched the first one, but
and then he was like, "What the?"
Yeah, well, his favorite character is Darth Vader.
Okay,
and so I was thinking, oh, let's try out the whole Darth Vader. He sat and we watched the entire original trilogy, from start to finish. As we know it, Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. But we had actually tried to start the prequels, but for the most part, he's watched The Mandalorian.
Okay.
And so that was
solid,
pretty much
great show
where we're at. Yeah. So yeah, and I think we watched the episode 7. Which is essentially kind of a really just a reboot of A New Hope, just a different direction. But so those were anything Darth Vader, he's all about the dark side. So, and he likes Kylo Ren as well. But that was our first connection.
Okay, so your first connection with Star Wars, I assumed it was that. That was a surprise for me. What were the surprises for you about now knowing intimately a kid, someone with autism, that you thought you knew before? Like, what were the surprises? Because again, a lot of people, I think most people, unless you have someone in your family who has autism or a good friend, we just kind of know the surface. Again, like the media version. What were a couple of the big surprises for you?
It's kind of interesting because he had a lot of stereotypical things that he did. He didn't make eye contact. He doesn't directly answer things. When you ask him about how his day was, he'd just be good and those kinds of things. As time went on, the things that surprise are really the progress that he makes as he moves forward and gets older and those kinds of things. Those little moments, because you're really caught up in a lot of the appointments and the IEP meetings and talking to the teachers and all these kinds of things constantly.
I know about those.
So when it comes down to it, the first time he said something to me and looked me straight in the eye, and it just caught me off guard.
Wow.
I do remember
IEP, for anybody listening, individualized education plan, very common phrase, education phrase for people who don't have, neuroatypical kids.
So typically, some kind of type of educational disability where you have to have a plan for your kid. But I still remember when he looked me in the eye, it was, we were getting him occupational therapy on the side, and he came out of it and looked me straight in the eye and said something right there. He was at eye level when I was seated, and it's just like, you just want to cry,
Yeah.
and, he still surprises me. He's a sweet kid. He struggles with emotional regulation, which a
Mm,
lot of kids with autism do. So it's, trying to get him to, think critically, move to make the communication choice before you make the meltdown choice, those kinds of things.
mm,
And when he achieves that, he's a super smart kid. He can read. He's really smart at math. Just those emotional issues that he has, just those are the things that kind of hold him back. But there's no question that he's going to have, a job, life, all those things. Knowing his limits, knowing when to decompress.
yeah.
This is one thing he was able to do, is like coming to me recently and say, hey, things are getting loud, when we're having a family party or something like that. I'm
Mm,
at my
hmm
in-laws. Hey,
hmm
things are getting loud. I can't take it anymore. Can you take me home? And that's, we drive separately to go to any of the family parties because the other kids are just running around screaming.
Right.
So,
That's
it
awesome that he
doesn't
can
doesn't really work
articulate
for
that
him.
to you. How old is he now?
Yeah,
He's
he's
10,
10
12,
now.
10. Yeah. Hmm
Yeah, 10. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So we
so
talked. Go ahead. Yeah.
oh no, that was it. Go ahead.
I was going to say we talked when we're talking about this episode about. I think you said something about like what does it mean to be like an autism dad or like an advocate for somebody
Hmm.
with autism. Because men, this is like the perfect first inaugural episode for the Manscape because
Yeah,
historically this is one of our challenges. Men, with a stoic, quiet, don't talk about our emotions. Again, when I talk about things on here, if anybody listens ever again, I'm always going to talk about like the rule, the
yeah,
trend, the majority trend. We don't talk about the exceptions. Talk about the trend for men historically has been like be strong, be silent. So like that idea
hmm,
of asking for help or that idea of advocating, for others, I think is a good trait for men, like, standing up for
hmm,
others. But, we
yeah,
know mob mentality, like we fall to that lowest common denominator a lot.
hmm,
So
yeah.
what does it mean to be an advocate, to be a man and
Well, it's interesting too. It's funny you say that because I have a few stories of some dads, but um, being an advocate is really, you're an advocate for your child, because you're an advocate for the autism community in general if you're an advocate for your child. But everybody's journey is different because it's a
hmm
spectrum. Where
hmm
people sit on the spectrum is going to be a completely different thing. I actually had a higher leader in my organization at work who has two kids with autism. One is nonverbal. I think she's 18 years old.
hmm
They, she has a lot of issues, but their other son is very high functioning, and it's easy, little easier to deal with. But when we had that first IEP meeting, it was they call it a MET. I don't know what it stands for, but it's where the school psychologist does a determination of autism, right? And so, and what they recommend going into kindergarten. Hey,
Oh, MET
we
means a multidisciplinary evaluation team.
there it is right there. So, and just as a FYI, it's an informational journey all the way, because nobody has all the answers. Nobody knows. Everything's changing. Autism, advocating for autism through organizations, through the trying to navigate things to get your child care, the appropriate care, is just, you just don't know everything, and you find out little bits and pieces along the way. So he got his initial met, and then as a sidebar, it's usually a state law that you can disagree with that to get an independent educational evaluation, and the school district will pay for it, which we did
Okay.
later on.
So kind
But
of
the
like an
first
appeal
one,
process. Yeah.
yeah, kind of. It's like we don't agree with what they're saying because we saw some other things, and I had some suspicions that he may have had dyslexia, and he does have severe dyslexia.
Yeah, that's something else.
But
I think that's something a lot of people don't know is I don't know why this is, but it's really common. I know for people with autism, and I'm not sure about other sort of neurotypical disabilities, where if you've got one, you've got like two or three. It's very
yeah,
rare, as I understand it, to just have like one diagnosis. There's usually
right.
like a couple things going on there.
Yeah, and so the first meeting that he had, we were in the room with, you're in the room with a whole bunch of people, a school psychologist, the teacher, a random teacher that they call in, the principal sometimes. And he had actually, they were actually approaching it gently, especially looking at me, saying, we made the determination of autism, and we recommend that he goes into a self-contained room. You know, very treading lightly, because I have heard stories from some my wife's friends where they have, a kid with autism or whatever, and the dad's not always excited about that, or
Why
wanting to
not?
advocate or wanting to have a role. That's a
Why?
good question.
Why?
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, honestly, the biggest thing is like,
You
I
got to
want
take a
to get
crack at
my
it.
son. That's right. Well, I want to get my son as far as I can get him. And it's my job to prepare my children for life, no matter what it is I have to do. And now I have this added barrier where I have to help him overcome in order for him to be successful in life.
So,
And
so
no
I'm
matter what
going to
that
dig
is.
in here a little bit, Tim. I feel like one of the lack of sort of excitement. You said dads aren't excited about that. I mean, is there a stigma? Like a
I
historical
think it's more of
stigma.
a stigma. Yeah, yeah. I
And
think
you
it's
said,
a stigma.
and then the other word, because I mean, I don't know too many people that would disagree with that. If someone has like, a neuroatypical disability, like there's a stigma with that. What do we call those classrooms? You just said it, not private classrooms.
No,
Self-contained
self-contained.
classrooms. And for
Yeah.
people who don't know, that's those classrooms that are just, people with, like with autism or other, but you also said
Disabilities.
barrier.
It's the special ed.
Yeah. But barrier is an interesting word though, because, and I know this as well as I do, but I'm going to call you out because that's what we're here to do, like, or call you in, that's another really
Yeah.
like hard negative word. When I have friends, I've got another friend who has an adult. They have a child. They're an adult. I don't want to like be too specific because they're not on the show. I haven't got their permission to talk about them, but they're nonverbal, and some of their friends, myself included, are like maybe that's their best life. Maybe this is he's living his best life. And yes, in terms of the mainstream, that word, barrier probably, is a good descriptive word. So, but this is me like trying to ask questions. It's historically there's a stigma. There are maybe barriers to learning in the, traditional way. But I mean, what do you think about all that stuff that I just threw out at you on our inaugural
Yeah.
podcast?
Yeah. Despite the fact that, and I understand educational barriers because I had them growing up myself. But
Is that theater? Because you were a theater
um,
kid? Well, Tim and I have the
actually, I
same
wasn't a
barrier. We
theater
were
kid.
both theater kids.
Yeah. I mean, I was more of theater when I was older in life, and I've always wanted to do that, but I was I was shy. I was introverted and stuff, but, I how does this sound? I mean, while we're talking about barriers, although your child has some barriers,
Mm-hmm.
it's, the dad really has a larger barrier,
Mm.
and that helps impede the
Mm.
success of your child because they
Mm-hmm.
can't get over their shit
Mm-hmm.
to help advocate for their kids,
Mm.
and no matter what, man, you gotta take care of your kids. That's like
Mm-hmm.
the first thing you want to have a kid, no matter what kind of kid comes out,
Mm-hmm.
whatever happens in life, those are your responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I do think that, and that was the first thought I had when they were treading lightly about that, because my wife and I had talked about it, was, do you think that some parents just don't want to, or in particular, some dads just want to give a hands up approach and say, just put them into general ed class and let them
Mm-hmm.
fail, essentially, not
Mm-hmm.
verbalizing that, but just let them
Mm-hmm.
fail because they don't want that stigma of their kid being essentially in a special education class.
Mm-hmm.
And my
Yeah, big time
perspective
stigma.
is, I gotta, yeah, I gotta do what it takes.
Dude, I think you
My
spoke
kid's gonna be fine.
some truth there. It is our barrier again as men in the mainstream. I don't have any biological children myself, but we all had those images. Especially if we have sons. The football player, the academic, the lawyer, whatever that is, of like this really high bars we want, for our kids. And dude, you said it. It is our barrier
Hmm.
for them living their best life. That may be totally
Right.
different than what we were picturing when we were watching movies growing up.
Yeah, that's true. And, I think that I would never want to put my child in a position to have them be held back in any way, shape, or form
Mm-hmm.
because of me, because I don't have my shit together or anything like that, and
Mm-hmm.
recently and I told you this, and I haven't really told the world this, but I did suspect, following the one thing I wanted to do is to kind of see what kind of a person my kid may turn into as an adult
Mm-hmm.
by seeking out adults with autism
Hmm.
and that are on social media, and see what they have to say. People who openly talk about it. And I started identifying with one particular person called. She goes by on Instagram. She goes by Atypical Erin, and she talks about a lot about her autism journey. And I
Mm-hmm.
started identifying with a lot of things myself,
Mm-hmm.
and so I took a few self-assessments. I haven't been diagnosed, but there's a strong possibility that I myself have autism. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
And I feel like this is one of those things that we're learning. I mean, I think it makes sense when you say it, that spectrum is much broader than we ever thought. Because it's true in every other way. You got people that are really
yeah,
good with numbers. And they just pick up numbers in math.
hmm,
I was always good at math, which was a big help and still is. People good with language. People good, with art, and painting and drawing and design. So like if our brains run this massive spectrum, across all, 7 billion of us, of course it also makes
hmm,
sense that these things considered neuroatypical, although maybe they're not. Maybe we'll find out in 100 years. We all have differences that could be qualified or classified, historically as disabilities. Maybe all
yeah,
that shit is swirly and mixed in there.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, for me, my learning ability was kind of hampered when I was in school, mainly because of how things were taught. Now they have the Montessori things. They have different ways, people on IEPs.
Mm-hmm.
Before, especially growing up in Southern California, I mean, it was just like you were either mainstream kid, you were remedial, or you were special education.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
they just didn't want to deal with, having to teach to the kids. or
Yeah.
having to help them out any, so they can learn the way that they can learn. And I didn't do very well. It wasn't until college that I started doing well, learn how to study.
Mm-hmm.
I did
Mm-hmm.
did well in college, and but I struggled through school,
Yeah.
and so recognizing those things now, I mean, I wouldn't want. I mean, my kid's he's smart as all get out, but
Mm-hmm.
but emotional regulation is the biggest thing for him. That's the one thing
Yeah.
that kind of stands in his way. But I don't want to do anything to kind of hamper his ability to kind of move past that, because I think he
Yeah.
will.
And that's one of those things that as said to me, that's this middle stuff as these classrooms. Schools need more funding so they can come up with different classrooms, because like having kids all sit in the aisle and rote memorize everything, that's archaic,
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't work for so many kids, maybe most kids. The autism supportive classrooms are really evolving. I mean, you have the self-contained classrooms, which is what you said in the past. We're like, okay, stick all the kids in one school, one classroom, just put a couple teachers in there to deal with them. Then they started getting, integrated classrooms. There's even a model out there where there's like, it might be Sark. I should have looked this up beforehand, but there are places that have classrooms that were kind of historically self-contained, and then they actually brought neurotypical kids into that, and they're kind of flipping that model on its head, where they're bringing neurotypical kids into atypical classrooms and mixing it up there.
Yeah.
So, the more nuance we can bring to education, the better off we're all going to be.
I agree with that. We did when he was in first grade, we took him out of public school. But when he was in first grade, he had a really great teacher, and she integrated him. He was kind of the class leader. He was, the furthest along. Writing was getting amazing, reading was getting amazing, and they were starting to integrate him into general education, which was great. But we in second grade year for him, still at the public school, great teacher, but it was all online. And that's when we got the independent, because of COVID. And then we got the independent educational evaluation, and they couldn't do anything about
Right.
dyslexia in the public school setting. So through the ESA program in Arizona, we were able to pull him and put him into a private school where that's where we divert all of his money.
Yeah.
And they had dyslexia certified teachers. So he was able to really just push forward faster than he ever has. So
I'm going to make a note, because that's got to be a future topic. ESA, because it can be like any other tool. It can be really misused.
Yeah, I can speak on that because.
But you just told me that like there's a really good use for it.
Yeah. So that's something we definitely could talk about. But so hey, maybe we'll get the governor of Arizona to come in and talk about that.
Yeah.
So
stranger things have happened.
I know. Who knows? Yeah.
But what I'm hearing, going back to the top, is to use this as a very intentional segue. You found something with the Mandalorian and Star Wars that works for you both. You both enjoy it. Yeah, we can thank what's her name? Kathleen what? It's not Kennedy. Who's the head of Disney?
Oh yeah, Kathleen Kennedy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Kathleen Kennedy. Yep. Thank her for that. We'll get her on the show next.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We'll get her on the show.
Yeah, because No, go ahead.
Oh no, it was. I don't think it was the Mandalorian so much as the Baby Yoda thing. So that's what brought the journey to the
Baby
original
Yoda.
trilogy. It was he's got some Baby Yoda stuff, and he was pretty fascinated with Baby Yoda. So as everyone was when the Mandalorian first came out, and that's how we showed who Yoda was. And
that's a really freaking fantastic segue, because who doesn't love Baby Yoda? Huge success. But I remember hearing an interview with, it must have been George Lucas. I mean, it was ages ago. It was when the prequels came out, the ones that George Lucas did.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it was with him or it was about him. They were talking about Jar Jar Binks and how terrible. Excuse me.
We'll edit that one out.
Yeah. How terrible Jar Jar Binks was. Oh, I know what it was. So then there was, I don't know if there was a cut to another interview. Anyways, there was a cut to an earlier interview, or I saw an earlier interview, where they were really worried about Yoda. Yoda was a big risk for Empire. Like, they were like, we're gonna do this puppet. We don't know if he's gonna, like, if it's gonna come across. So, movies as forms of art, they take, all good art takes risks. And Yoda was a big risk. Paid off big time. Baby Yoda paid off big time. Jar Jar Binks, massive fail. So that just made me think about all that. Art takes risks, and sometimes you win, sometimes you fall flat on your freaking face.
Yeah, I think that there has to be some kind of they just made a dumbed down character with Jar Jar Binks, and I think that's really why Jar Jar wasn't really well received.
You know movies better than I do. Do you think there was any truth about him coming out as like a Sith Lord later on? Because I remember seeing like a YouTube video or something where there was like some indicators about that. What do you think?
Yeah, it was. I think it was just a joke, some fan theory and stuff. But because I mean, what were the underwater people are all?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so they're not out being Jedis and stuff. But
yeah,
I think it was just fan theory. But
okay.
I mean, I think some people wanted to evolve the character. Is really what they wanted to do, and some people flat out just cut Jar Jar Binks out of the entire film in the first prequel. So just because it just wasn't a well developed, and also we have to consider that when we moved past Star Wars and we got to Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, we're writing and developing these characters, and when George Lucas came around to do the prequels, he was writing and developing all of them,
doing everything.
He didn't. Yeah, he had not directed a Star Wars film since the first Star Wars film. He didn't direct Empire and Jedi. He just did the first one. He had story credit. He had some great ideas when it came to doing the Indiana Jones, but I mean, he lost, as Austin Powers would say, he lost his mojo. So,
definitely lost his mojo. Because
and
it was. I think it's fair to say, and this is my opinion, but I have a podcast now, so you're going to hear it. It's the most influential movie trilogy of all time, of movies, and henceforth of our pop culture. The obviously New Hope, Empire, Jedi.
I fully agree, because somebody actually, I just saw recently where someone put the Harry Potters up to Star Wars and basically called it a bit of a ripoff of Star Wars.
I saw. Where was that? Yeah.
It was
was it a YouTube thing?
It was like I think it was like a YouTube or a reel on Instagram, but they had a young boy who lived with his aunt and uncle, and
that's right.
He had to go find himself,
find his own magical powers.
Yeah. He's and Harry Potter's just
and Dad was killed by like a bad guy,
Yes. Right. Yeah, that's right. He's just Luke Skywalker with a stupid lightsaber. So, with a stick for a lightsaber.
Right.
So, yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really good. So where does, I think a big question, now that we've established I'm pretty inaugural that Star Wars is the most. Where does Star Wars go for this? Did I hear that they're actually kind of pulling back a little bit? Because to relate it to your podcast, The Final Take,
Yeah.
I know you and Nelson have talked about this. I think Marvel has pulled a Krispy Kreme, or is close to it. They've saturated their own market with so many movies, and I love these movies. I love Marvel movies. It's really good escapism for me. I turn off my brain. I'm very entertained. I don't care what Scorsese says about them. I'm very entertained by these movies, but there's so many. I don't know how you can keep doing fresh work when you have a mainstream Hollywood movie that's going to have a happy ending. There's going to be a plot twist. So I don't mean to get off track here, but where do you think Star Wars goes with this? And Lucasfilm, Disney,
Star
and
Wars
all that.
They kind of digressed with, they pulled back on a lot of films. Just after, I think it was The Last Jedi really got off track as far as when you.
And by the way, I don't want to take away from the final podcast. If you want to say shut up and go listen to the final take, by all means. But
you can go seek out. So here, check out our episodes. We'll talk about it in detail. But The Last Jedi is an okay Star Wars film, standing alone by itself.
I like
but
it. Yeah.
People have to keep in mind that it is a rising action film in a trilogy. So you want it to have the same kind of stakes as The Empire Strikes Back, where everything is intense, everything comes to a head, and then you essentially have the third film. And from what I understand is J.J. Abrams mapped out all the films, but there were going to be different filmmakers doing this, the second and third of the 8 and 9. But I didn't think Solo was a terrible film. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. But
it's probably my least. It's probably my least favorite of the offshoots, because I thought they tried to fit too much in, too many references.
Yeah. I see that they want to do that.
It just got annoying, and I was no, just make a good film. It wasn't bad, but
and it was band-aided together.
Okay.
Yeah, I liked it. I watched it a couple of times, but the thing is that I think people wanted to hate it because they hated the Last Jedi, and it was the same thing with people wanted to hate all the Zack Snyder DC films, but because you hate one and then you want to hate the rest of them. But everybody will hate watch all the films and stuff, and it just kind of tanks that, because they had
is that a thing? Hate watching, is that a thing?
Yeah, I think it is. So people will go to see it, and they're like, and it really just kind of, J.J. Abrams really had to repair his vision for that trilogy, and at that point it was really just kind of damaged. But for the most part, though, they're really investing in the Disney Plus TV market, and Boba Fett. They had, Mandalorian's solid gold. I think
Agreed.
They're going to do the Ahsoka Tano. That's going to be, I think that's going to be amazing, because that's a well-developed character. The Boba Fett was a little slow, but I looked at that as a crossroads to all these different offshoots of what they want to do, like the Rangers of the New Republic and stuff like that. So they're really heavily investing in their TV, and just really trying to do something just outside of the Skywalker franchise that is still kind of tied in a little bit, which I can appreciate.
I respect that from a form of entertainment, because I do have an arts background, as we alluded to before. But I also think that that's like some signposts, is they're spending so much money on TV shows, because I love going to the movies. I mean, I'm a loyal Harkins, cup buyer, and I love that experience. And I know it is waning. I don't know if it ever goes away, but I'm kind of bummed to be seeing so much more on the TV and less on the big screen. But I do think that is the way of the world. Everybody's got a TV screen in their pocket, and on
Yeah,
their computer. And
that's true.
for better or for worse, I think somewhat for worse, we're losing. I know in the long run we lose theaters and we lose that experience, or it just becomes rarer, and that's kind
Yeah.
of a bummer.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, I'm okay with it as long as it's kind of story driven and stuff like
Mm.
that. If it's story driven, episodic,
Hmm.
it's serial. They just want to tell a larger story. I thought the Obi-Wan uh, series was okay. A little
I
too
liked it a
long,
lot.
but
Okay.
but it was every episode kind of ended the same. Just near miss, near miss, near miss, and
Hmm.
then they finally fought and stuff. And
Mm.
we had a really great podcast about the Obi-Wan. You definitely have to check that episode out. But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to be one of those podcasters that says go check out the podcast, but well, we're podcasting about other podcasts. But
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
yeah,
I guess that's a thing.
but yeah, they're yeah, those I think they're going to knock it out of the park with the upcoming shows they have on
Okay.
them.
Yeah. I wouldn't be
On deck.
surprised because they do good stuff. Well, I might
Yeah.
take that as a moment to. One of the things we're going to do in the show is have trivia, and I do
Okay.
have a piece of trivia to put out there. Trivia is going to be harder now that everybody's got Bing on their phone. So that was the thing, right? Bing, like a search
Uh,
engine.
yeah.
So here's our trivia
Pops up on Edge.
for the show, because we could wax rhapsodic about Star Wars all day long, but I know people know about Star Wars and have their own opinions on it. So here's our opinion question for the day: what Phoenix location did Steven Spielberg show his first film publicly? And
Okay. Are we gonna
there's
answer
people
that in the
that
next
know
episode,
more
or-
about. No, that's the next episode. We're gonna bring
Okay.
it. There's a Phoenix location where he had, I believe, his first public showing outside of like his friends or Boy Scouts, if that was the case in the movie. Was it the what was the movie? The Goldbergs? No, the
Oh, the
Showbirds.
Fablemans?
Fablemans. There we go. So, and they skipped this part, so it's not in that movie. So don't go watch that movie. But there's some trivia for you.
All
There's a
right,
Phoenix
so are you
location.
alluding to his appearance on Inside the Actor's Studio?
No,
What he talked
I know this separately. I know this from other things, but
Okay.
I haven't
He
seen him
does
on Inside the
mention-
Actors Studio.
Okay, yeah, so he does mention that he had a screening of a film
Okay.
in his first
Phoenix.
film in Phoenix.
Okay.
So
So if you want to research
yeah.
this, I'm sure it's out there. If you Bing or Ask Jeeves or whatever, go ask Jeeves.
he's got a 2 hour Inside the Actor Studio. So
Okay,
so,
but he's
yeah.
not an actor. What the heck?
It's a great. Yeah, they get directors on there every once in a while.
Oh, okay.
So, but
Okay.
they don't have that around anymore. They need to
They got to
bring that
change. They got to change the
So-
title.
back. Okay.
Anything else you want to
The
say?
next episode.
Yeah, about Star Wars or autism and autism
Pretty
wars.
much
Being a
covers
good
it.
dad.
Yeah. Be a man.
Uh,
Be a good dad.
Mm,
Advocate. Buy a tee that says that you advocate. Don't. It's just remember it's like I feel like it's like growing up without a father if you're not fully meeting your child's needs. To do the things that you need to do. And granted, there's times where it's like days are hard. It's like meltdowns are bad, and and you don't want to. You want to do that man approach of suck it up, kid, but you can't.
right.
That's where it's hard, and you have to sit down and get on his level. My wife's constantly reminding me of this, even when I forget, and it's like sit down and he's not going to get to a place without this kind of care. And, and it starts at home, so.
Yeah. Brother, thanks for that honesty. And even that phrase "suck it up" means keep it inside. It's like, no. This is the this is the new.
This is what men used to do.
Yeah,
Bottle
absolutely.
So you explode.
Bottle that shit up. Don't let it out.
Shove it
Don't
down.
let anybody see.
Yeah, that's right. Well,
Stuff it.
Okay.
All the way down.
Well, that is our view of the Manscape.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us in our inaugural episode.
Tune in next week when we talk about the transgender world. A lot of going on, especially here in Arizona. We're one of these states where stuff's going on, and we're going to have a special guest, Michael Soto, to share their views on the transgender world. And follow the links. We're going to put some links in there to this Star Wars comparison to Harry Potter. See what your opinions. And as Tim said at the beginning, feel free to email us any questions, comments at the manscapepod@gmail.com. Does that do it for us, Tim?
That does it.